A reading from the second book of Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 to 17. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him God had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans on one of their raids had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she served Naaman's wife, and she said to her mistress, "If only my lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said, and the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." Naaman went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Who am I to give life or death that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy?" But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king, "Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and your flesh will be restored and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of God his God, and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached and said to him, "If the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you have not done it? How much more when all he said to you was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So Naaman went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company. He came and stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Please accept a present from your servant." But Elisha said, "As God lives, whom I serve, I will accept nothing." He urged him to accept, but he refused. And then Naaman said, "Then please let 2 loads of earth be given to your servant, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god except your God." And may God speak to us through these verses today. Poor Naaman. He had it all, or seemed to anyway. Wealth, power, fame. He was very well connected, buddies with the king. He was the greatest general in Aram, which is now called Syria. He had everything that was supposed to bring people happiness and security. But he had one problem, and it ruined everything else. He had a terrible skin disease. Now, we're told it was leprosy, but it might not have been what we call leprosy. In the Bible, leprosy is sometimes a generic word for a lot of skin problems like eczema, psoriasis, and so on. If Naaman had had real leprosy, he would not have been allowed around other people, especially the king. He would have been isolated and shunned. But still, in those days, skin diseases made you unclean. The Hebrew book of Leviticus has whole chapters on skin diseases and rituals for cleaning them. And even though Naaman was not Hebrew, most people in his country would not want to shake his hand or eat at his table. Now, Naaman had led battles and raids against the Hebrews. His nation was bigger and more powerful. His nation took what they wanted and solved their problems with military might. Yet there's Naaman, a great general in a great nation, unable to solve his problem with any amount of wealth or power. But one of his raids had brought a Hebrew slave girl into his home, and this girl would have known a little bit about these skin disease issues, so she said, if only Naaman would go see this prophet back in Israel named Elisha, he would help him. Naaman leaps at the chance. He loads a caravan with gold and silver and clothing, and he brings his servants, and he leads the caravan with military chariots. He traveled in a style that was befitting this top-decorated warrior. Anyone who saw such a caravan would know that it was transporting a big shot. Naaman arrives at the house of the prophet Elisha out in the back country, and he waits for Elisha to come greet him. But instead, Elisha sends out his servant with this message: just go wash 7 times in the Jordan River, you'll be fine. Well, Naaman throws a tantrum. First, Elisha sends a servant out. Doesn't Naaman the Great deserve the respect of a personal appearance? And frankly, Elisha's advice sounds more like a prank than a cure. I came all this way to go dunk myself in your river? What kind of God do you work for? Where's the hand waving? Where's the magic spells? And he thinks Elisha wants to humiliate him. And he's ready to storm off back home. But then another servant offers some wise advice. If this prophet told you to do something really difficult and complicated, you would do it. Instead, it's something easy. Why not try it? So Naaman must be pretty desperate, because once again he listens to a slave, a servant. He swallows his pride and he decides to take this plunge into the river. He would have to strip off his costume, his military outfit, his shiny medals of honor, the rings and bracelets, until he finally stands on the river shore naked. His skin disease no longer hidden, but exposed. And he plunges into the water. We're told he does this 7 times, and to his amazement, he is healed. We're told his flesh is brand new like a child's. He is so relieved that he tells Elisha, now I know there is no God but yours. And he offers Elisha all the treasures that he's brought. But Elisha refuses payment. He's not in the God business to make a fast buck. But maybe Elisha also knows that, if all that silver and gold and pomp and splendor couldn't help Naaman, if it could not bring healing or peace of mind to him, well, then what good really was it? So Naaman asked permission to take some of Israel's soil back home with him, as a reminder of the power of Israel's God. From now on, for Naaman, there is no other God. Now, of course, instead of the soil, we might wonder, well, why didn't Naaman just bottle up some of that water from the river and take it home? He could set up a bottling plant right there and make a fortune. Sell this as a miracle cure. Imagine the fortune to be made selling magic water. In fact, there's a TV evangelist doing that right now. I've seen his commercials. But of course, maybe that's not the point of the story. It's not about magic water. It's not about a magic number 7 times. Maybe Elisha could have told him 6 times, 8 times. For all we know, Elisha simply knew that that river contained certain minerals that were good for skin problems. Maybe Naaman's treatment lasted 7 days, 1 good long soak every day. We don't know. Or maybe, just maybe, the real healing began when Naaman made the decision to give in to Elisha and his God, to strip himself of everything that he thought made him what he was, that wealth, that power, his own strength and might, to let go of pride and prestige, to expose his weakness, to humble himself by becoming as vulnerable as a naked child. Maybe what made Naaman whole was a simple childlike trust, and that the healing that he found had more to do with his soul than with his skin. It could be that Elisha saw through what Naaman thought was his problem and found the deeper problem Naaman didn't know he even had. Centuries later, Jesus would preach how difficult it is to find happiness and wholeness for people who are obsessed with their possessions and their own self-importance. People who hold so tightly to what they think is important that God can't give them what they really need. Jesus also said that if we want to be part of God's kingdom, we have to become like children. Now, whatever happened to Naaman, he emerged from this experience a changed man. He tasted a bit of God's kingdom, and it turned his life in a very different direction. Now, the lectionary that I use to preach from usually includes the story of Naaman for the Sunday closest to the 4th of July. And I think that maybe there's a reason for that. The 4th celebrates our becoming a free and independent nation, and in the century since then, we have become arguably the richest, most powerful nation on earth. Does Naaman's story have something to say to us, not only as individuals, but as a nation? Our country does have many wonderful qualities, and like Naaman, we seem to have it all. And yet, for all our freedom and power, we do also show some signs of poor health in our national soul. Political corruption, unrestrained greed, exploitation and abuse of human beings. The world's highest rate of gun deaths, one of the world's worst education systems. Today, we value flashy image and might over depth and character. And today, there are some nations that don't want to shake our hand or sit at our table. Now, we may ask, is that the kind of freedom that the founders of this nation had in mind? Is it what God intended for us? A 19th century minister once wrote that freedom is a universal license to do good. That's the kind of freedom that can make us truly great, as Jesus defines greatness, the kind of freedom that can heal us. Naaman's story suggests that the cure for what ails us is not complicated, but fairly simple, but only if we are willing to humble ourselves and do it. We may also notice in the story of Naaman that the only people who seem to have any kind of common sense or compassion or even godly wisdom are not the kings and generals. It's the servants. It's the people down at the bottom. Down there where you don't have much, you might learn humility and compassion a lot easier than you can at the top where you have it all. And maybe a lesson here is that if we want to find our way to spiritual health, we need to listen more to what the poor and powerless have to say and let their voices have a greater influence on us. Naaman discovered that if he wanted to find health, if he wanted to be free, he had to stop worshiping the gods of wealth and power. He had to stop trying to get what he wanted by throwing his weight around and bullying people. He had to let go of his vanity and self-importance and plunge into the waters of humility. But he found it was worth it. It was worth surrendering all of that to find wholeness and gain the kind of life that God wants for us, hopes for us, and offers us. Amen.